Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the political fun and games scheduled for Westminster tomorrow as MPs debate what action, if any, should be taken against these 7 Conservative MPs accused of maligning the Privileges Committee and, as a result, potentially committing a contempt of Parliament. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, unfortunately, I'm going to be out tomorrow attending an awards jolly for my partner's workplace. So any fireworks in Parliament today, or tomorrow, sorry, will go completely uncommented on until I can get back. But I thought it would be worth laying the groundwork and discussing my thoughts on what may or may not happen. So as most people will know, Boris Johnson was found guilty of 5 different types of contempt of Parliament a few weeks ago. More than one count, 5 different types. I still find it hilarious because he was only being investigated for 1. But as a result of attacking the committee, spreading malicious lies in the media and attempting to exert influence on members of the committee, he earned himself 4 more. MPs duly voted by a large majority to accept the full findings of the committee, and so Johnson is formally guilty of those 5 types of contempt. But as Boris Johnson was found in contempt on grounds of maligning the committee, against amongst other grounds of course, it does beg a question. If Johnson has been found guilty by a majority of MPs of being guilty of a contempt by impugning the committee, well, what about the 7 Tory allies who also did the same thing? The Privileges Committee prepared a special report highlighting the behaviour which was deemed to be potentially a contempt, and MPs will be considering it tomorrow. Of course, the Privileges Committee has no power to investigate contempt of its own volition. It only acts when the whole House of Commons votes for it to. The Liberal Democrats are putting forward a motion which will call for all 7 to be investigated for contempt and, if found guilty, an appropriate punishment recommended. Now that could be spicy. And it poses a serious problem for Sunak. Being honest, I don't think the motion will succeed, but it will still be problematic for the Tories. I'll explain both points. So the reason Boris Johnson is the first Prime Minister to be investigated for deliberately misleading Parliament is because he was so reckless that it was less damaging for Tory MPs to allow the investigation than to block it. Ordinarily, the party of government would defend their leader every day of the week, even when everyone can see they're guilty. But in this case, the public had turned on Johnson to such an extent that being seen to protect him from consequences would have cost them loads of votes in their own seats. So Tory MPs had to bite the bullet and decide it wasn't worth the entire Tory party going down the plug hole to save Boris Johnson. So they had to accept the investigation, knowing where it was likely to lead. It's why, despite saying that the Chris Pincher scandal is what actually brought Boris Johnson down, his days were numbered anyway. There was no way Tories could have allowed him to still be Prime Minister when the verdict came through. A reputational and constitutional nightmare. So will the same apply in Parliament today? Well, yes, but mostly no. Yes, because if Tory MPs vote down the motion for an investigation, it will be seen by some to be covering for their chums, to be allowing Tory MPs to escape the rules that bind everyone else. One rule for us, no rules for them. However, what outraged the public with regards to Boris Johnson was not so much the lies or his attacks on the committee, but the Partygate offences themselves. The callous way he partied and encouraged others to party while people were unable to be with dying loved ones. In this case, although Jacob Rees-Mogg has admitted to lockdown breaking social events of his own, it's not widely known. As far as most of the public are concerned, these MPs were not responsible for the Partygate outrages. They're only guilty of maybe going a bit too far in defending their mate. I also don't think this matter has really cut through to the general public much either. So it should be relatively easy for Tory MPs to vote for some fairly toothless motion of their own, like a motion of admonishment, rather than risk a full-scale investigation. After all, what if the investigation ends up with suspensions of 10 days or more because they can't keep their mouths shut? The Tories are in enough trouble with the 3 by-elections next week, with 2 more likely in the autumn. The last thing they need is another half a dozen in the new year. However, if it did somehow happen that MPs voted for these investigations, it would represent a spectacular own goal for Rishi Sunak, even for him. Because he could have prevented all of this by simply making it clear that any Conservative MP who impugned the committee in public would lose the whip, no exceptions. With the possible exception of Nadine Dorries, who was as mad as a hatter anyway. The others would have fallen into line. Granted, some of the pressure was applied before Sunak became party leader, But had he acted straight away last October, I can't imagine the committee would have made anything of earlier indiscretions. But like I say, I think this one will be easy for Tory MPs to deal with. It won't even be like they're voting down the investigation. As long as they get behind a motion of their own, which signals their disapproval at the behaviour, albeit without a punishment, then they can just claim that the 7 new investigations is just going a bit far. It's the Lib Dems playing party politics. However, although I don't think investigations will be voted for, although I don't rule anything out, I do think this is still a problem for the Tories that they could do without, because it can easily be characterised as another Owen Paterson situation. Voting to get their mates off. Rishi Sunak's no different to Boris Johnson. They can use it in campaigns. Your MP voted to let Jacob Rees-Mogg off, or Brendan Clark-Smith, or whomever they think is the least popular of the miscreants in the constituency they're fighting. And abstaining won't help in itself, because enough Tory MPs are going to have to vote against it to make sure it fails. Because I'm assuming Labour and the SNP MPs will support it. Can't think of any reason why not. This is basically a free hit for opposition parties, given that the public really don't appreciate the idea of covering for your mates, which is why the Owen Paterson scandal blew up in the first place. This could be worth a few anti-Tory votes come the election. So I think we'll see some interesting things said. I doubt the Lib Dem motion will succeed, but it would be hilarious if it did. And I think there will be a Conservative motion which allows them to pretend they're taking it seriously whilst actually doing nothing. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.